If you've seen Omniverse 2 by Conundrummer, aka David Liu, you already know that it's a mind-blowingly good Line Rider track. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. It's only 4 minutes long, so it's way shorter than this video essay, and it just might be my favorite Line Rider track of all time. Links up above and down below. Are you back? Did you watch it? Wasn't it amazing? You may have noticed that in the credits, David states that the project was started in 2008, which is, well, it's a very long time ago. Line Rider's only existed since 2006 after all. And if you know anything about Line Rider history from my videos on that subject, you'll know that Line Rider has changed a lot since 2008. Not only are the possibilities within Line Rider vastly expanded with modern tools, but over the last 5 years there's been a major cultural shift within the Line Rider community about what kinds of tracks are valued. Additionally, if you've followed Line Rider community for a while, you'll know that the unfinished version of Omniverse 2 released in 2008, Omniverse 2 Beta, was long regarded as a classic showcase of Line Rider technique. So, how did Omniverse 2 Beta, one of the most celebrated technique-based tracks from the early days of Line Rider, become Omniverse 2, a suspenseful, mind-bending narrative of escape from a collapsing universe with breathtaking visuals? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Rabbit Squirrel, and this is Line Rider in Depth. Before we get into talking about Omniverse 2 itself, let's talk about how it came to be. That's right, it's Line Rider history time. I'm going to take you all the way back to 2008. Line Rider has been around for almost 2 years, and there is a thriving community of teenagers making videos of their Line Rider tracks and posting them on internet forums for each other to watch. There's talk going around of a second Tournament of Champions happening soon, in which people submit their best Line Rider track and then a series of elimination polls eventually determine who has the, quote, best video on YouTube. The first tournament was a huge deal, and it's been a major topic of discussion since last year. So naturally, a lot of people are really hyped about the second one. And some people start working on what they hope will be the best track ever, and will be awarded that #1 title in the new tournament. Conundrummer had already made a name for himself with Omniverse back in 2007, a mind-bending track of its own with heavy exploitation of a trick that would become known as anti-gravity wells. So he decided to make a sequel, Omniverse 2. Over the next couple of months, he created a Line Rider track that went through sections of every technique he could think of. Granules, XY, Alt Quirk, Flat Sled Recycling, High Speed Manu Quirk, and even an All Y section. Unfortunately, as is often the case with Line Rider, the track took much longer than expected, and as the deadline for the tournament submissions closed in, David realized he wouldn't have time to add scenery to the project. He was forced to pull an all-nighter just to try to finish up the last minute of the track itself, and as any college student can tell you, it's very difficult to think critically or creatively past 2 a.m., so the end of the track suffered considerably. David decided to release the track as Omniverse 2 Beta, with a different music choice than originally planned and a disclaimer at the start of the video urging people in all caps to watch the full version. I don't think a single person would have guessed that the full version would eventually come out on December 31st, 2019. It would have sounded like a bad joke to everyone at the time, including David. As it turns out, making a Line Rider track with sections showcasing a whole bunch of different techniques was a winning formula, and Omniverse 2 Beta by Conundrummer was eventually crowned the winner of the entire tournament. This was a big deal. David beat out Revolution Finale by Flagcapper, Cosmic Underworld by Sam the Poor, Salvation by X6112NT13, End of the World by Blesses Cotton Socks, Bolted to the Wall by Yours Truly, King by ZN Freak, Manual Mayhem X by Sorvius, and even Transcendental by Tech Dog. And this is how an unfinished track with a rushed ending became one of the most venerated releases of all time within the Line Rider community. It even coined the term Omnitrack, which would come to describe and popularize a genre of Line Rider track with sections showcasing different styles and techniques. It is difficult to describe the level of hype there was for the full scened version of Omniverse 2 within the Line Rider community. It was quite possibly the most anticipated track in all of Line Rider's 13-year history. As late as 2011, 3 years after the beta version came out, you could still find people saying that it was the Line Rider release they were most excited for. Though by that time, most people were starting to lose hope that it was ever actually going to be released. David never completely quit Line Rider, but his activity and output were pretty sparse over the next 7 years, and when he was around, he was often more focused on programming a new build of Line Rider from scratch than finishing Omniverse 2, eventually succeeding in creating Line Rider JavaScript, a precursor to the build that can be found on linerider.com today in 2015. In an interview that same year, he said he still wanted to finish Omniverse 2, but he didn't think he would be able to do so without help from others, which was an idea that ultimately never really panned out. In 2017, however, David started teasing that he was working on Omniverse 2 again, which was met with a somewhat lukewarm combination of disbelief and muted excitement, along with plenty of "what year is it?" comments. It was difficult to imagine how a completed Omniverse 2 could be relevant in 2017, given the reputation of the beta version from 2008. I myself remained skeptical that Omniverse 2 could live up to over a decade of hype until maybe a few days before it was released, when I started seeing snippets of the visuals and David started hinting at the lore. And then, inconceivably, on the last day of the 2010s, December 31st, 2019, Omniverse 2 was finally released. And while I don't know if anyone could judge whether it was worth 11 years of waiting, the completed Omniverse 2 was more than merely impressive. It was undeniably immersive, compelling, entertaining, and accessible. It was a game changer. So how in the world did David pull this off? To answer this question, first let's talk about the overarching narrative. While the element of Bosch attempting and failing to escape was present at the end of the first Omniverse track in 2007, and it was planned to be a major aspect of Omniverse 2 from the start, the execution of this central concept in its final form is nothing short of stellar. With the opening visuals, we are introduced to the world in which Bosch finds themselves, a sparse, non-Euclidean environment where the laws of physics are significantly different from our own. By pairing this movement and aesthetic with music from the Matrix soundtrack, David successfully creates an atmosphere of suspense and tension. Then, as the music builds and Bosch is launched upwards, we zoom out dramatically to see enormous scrawled text reading, "You must escape." And also, off to the side, is that where we have to get to escape? David only gives us a second to comprehend what we're seeing before Bosch falls back down, away from our possible escape route. This next section is where it starts feeling a bit like an action movie. The rules in this universe seem to fluctuate constantly, and there are multiple sections that generate a feeling of being trapped. As Bosch finally breaks out of this nightmare and launches upward as the camera zooms out again, it becomes clear that they don't have enough speed to make it, just as the camera pans over and reveals we are headed downward, away from our escape route, toward an area with danger scrawled on the wall. As we tumble through a perilous tunnel past giant intimidating spikes, we see more scrawled text telling us to get back up, and then later, as we fly around in an underworld area that feels palpably huge, we see the text, "turn back." You'll notice I've stopped saying Bosch and started saying we, because at this point, as a viewer, you're invested. There's a clear goal, clear obstacles to reach that goal, and there have been repeated failed attempts to reach the goal. And you want to see what's going to happen. This is visual storytelling at its finest. All this build-up climaxes in what is perhaps the most breathtaking sequence ever created in Line Rider. After finally making their way to the escape route, Bosch spirals upward in a double helix, which tightens until it gives way to rotating animated shapes, which in turn tighten until they give way to lines narrowing in on Bosch as the camera zooms in until, in an instant, Bosch is suspended upside down in the endless white void. Roll credits. This sequence is remarkable for how effectively it builds tension through visuals, how well it utilizes the themes of non-Euclidean space and structure present throughout the track, and for the impact of the ambiguous cliffhanger ending. I don't know about you, but during this sequence, my heart was beating faster, my eyes got wider, and I found myself holding my breath. This ending sequence differs from the ending of Omniverse 2 Beta. Unlike the rest of the track, which remains intact from 2008, the ending was made in 2017. The remarkable thing is how well they fit together, even as the added track pulls off stunts that would have been nearly impossible in 2008. So how does David keep the rest of the track from feeling super dated? The truth is that the track itself is dated, but the focus of the completed version of Omniverse 2, unlike the beta version, is not on the dated techniques showcased in the track itself, but on the motion generated by each style and the aesthetic that the lines create. The circular granules are visualized as spheres that Bosch rides all the way around. Gravity well rolls are visualized as 3D objects floating in space. The XY section looks like glitched out computer circuitry, and it's followed by the alt quirk section, where the vertical and horizontal axes from the XY distort and collapse into abstract expressionist scribbles. Recycling sections in the all Y section feel claustrophobic and tense, which contrasts beautifully with the massive air times and the high-speed menu quirk section, where Bosch rides ribbons that twist and twirl through space. In a way that was not readily apparent from watching the beta version, each of these sections serves a narrative purpose in the context of the work as a whole. While surely not all of this was planned from the start, it's clear that these conceptual ideas were present in some form back in 2008, and that's pretty remarkable. One aspect that was likely not present in 2008, however, is the lore. The text scribbled on the walls is first used to drive narrative tension, but near the end of the track it becomes ambiguous and cryptic. Right before the ending sequence, the camera zooms out farther than ever has before, and we see two things we hadn't been able to see until now. Off to the left, text declares, "The Omniverse is a giant quirk in the simulation." Below it, observant viewers will recognize the entire original Omniverse track has been literally copied and pasted into Omniverse 2. Thus, the text has a double meaning. First, Omniverse 1 is a giant quirk inside the simulation of Omniverse 2. But more interestingly, Omniverse 2 is also a giant quirk inside the physics simulation that is Line Rider itself. Then, upward and to the right, text reading "Embrace the Void" can be seen, though the text itself is fading away into the white void. This also has a double meaning, albeit somewhat more ambiguously. First, playing off the text below it that reads "You must escape," this text declares the conditions necessary for that escape, which is reflected in the ending sequence where reality distorts and collapses before Bosch is eventually left hanging in the void. What would escape from the Omniverse even mean within the physics simulation of Line Rider but the blank, white, endless void that is beyond the boundaries of every Line Rider track? Of course, this text has a meta-meaning as well. The scenery of Omniverse 2 is incredibly effective from a narrative perspective, and this is in part because David has an excellent eye for when to leave things blank. Many times, Line Rider scenery artists have tried to add as much detail as possible to their scenery, and this results in tedious, time-consuming projects that often lose their narrative focus along the way. So the meta-commentary here is that David is encouraging other Line Rider artists to embrace white space and keep scenery simple in favor of focusing on narrative. In the ribbon sections, David has gravity wells that are simply left alone without any attempt at incorporating them into the surrounding scenery. And as someone who has spent hours trying to figure out how to work individual gravity wells into a scenery environment in Line Rider, I was shocked to realize how little it actually mattered to have those lines open and exposed. This is all to say, we should all probably embrace the void a little more, myself included. Another part of Omniverse 2 that I think deserves special attention is the groundbreaking camera work. Early in Line Rider history, the camera controls were limited to clunky keystrokes allowing you to zoom in and out at fixed speeds. Today, the build on LineRider.com boasts a much more powerful camera tool with smoother motion handling, timeline-based keyframes, and even panning tools. Unfortunately, the user interface is limited to entering command line code in the JavaScript console right now, but once you learn how to use it, it can be incredibly effective. And at present, Omniverse 2 is by far the best example of what can be accomplished with the LineRider.com camera. Not only does the camera frame Bosch at various zoom levels to alternately draw attention to the environment and to Bosch's movement at the appropriate times, an oft overlooked but very important aspect to any Line Rider video, but the camera is also used to frame different visual sections throughout the track, sometimes moving with Bosch, sometimes enhancing the movement of Bosch, and sometimes sitting still while Bosch moves around within the camera bounds. The sudden zooming and panning motions even serve to enhance shifts in the music, and this works in concert with the differences in visual sections beautifully. And finally, the camera is used to frame story beats, such as the massive zoom outs that reveal text, the tension-filled pan over to reveal the danger text, and the final zoom in during the ending sequence. Everyone making art in Line Rider today, including myself, should be taking notes on how David uses the camera in Omniverse 2, and thinking about how we might apply the ideas presented here in our own work. One of the big reasons the camera work is so breathtaking is that David programmed the LineRider.com camera himself. He actually developed the whole build of Line Rider that was used to complete Omniverse 2. Several mods that he developed over the last few years were also utilized in the process of creating Omniverse 2, such as the Shade tool, the Slice tool, and the Bezier tool. And for the animation at the end, he even wrote code to automate the drawing of some of the lines. In some ways, developing this build of Line Rider could almost be considered a necessary precursor to bringing Omniverse 2 to its full potential. It's actually pretty inspiring to realize that, in a way, David has literally programmed Omniverse 2 into existence, using Line Rider Beta 2 as an inspirational starting point. Okay, this video is already several times the length of the track it's critiquing, so it's time for me to get on my soapbox a bit. As someone who once wrote an entire video essay on how LineWriter artists would do well to treat LineWriter more as an art medium and how quirk techniques are better utilized for entertainment purposes when they're in service of a compelling narrative, this track could practically be my poster child for how to effectively utilize quirk techniques. And this would be true even if Omniverse 2 Beta never existed, and we only had the completed Omniverse 2. I could ramble about that for a very long time, and it would appear that I already have. But what I find most compelling about Omniverse 2 is how it took a track that, due to the variety of impressive technical elements it showcased, was propped up for years by quirk elitists as one of the best tracks ever made, and transformed it into an undeniably compelling dramatic narrative that utilizes quirk techniques in ways that are clearly more interesting and evocative than the techniques themselves alone, and in the process actually removes focus from those techniques and creates what is ultimately a more entertaining final product by doing so. It feels like David somehow managed to reappropriate his own track from over a decade ago to showcase the true value of quirk techniques in a massive statement that flies in the face of anyone who focuses on those quirk techniques for their own sake in the name of progress or ingenuity, and says, the real progress, the real ingenuity, is figuring out how to use them to tell a good story. It feels like David took his own track, which happened to be one of the tracks most celebrated for showcasing quirk techniques, the track that literally coined the term Omnitrack, and said to everyone who had praised it as one of the best tracks ever made, hey, check it out. This exact same track is actually a lot cooler when the techniques are used in service of a narrative. This is where I ask myself, is Omniverse 2 my favorite LineWriter track ever made? My tastes in LineWriter and my understanding of what LineWriter is and could be have changed so much in the last 13 years. So it's really hard to compare how I felt about TechDog's tracks in 2008 to how I feel about Omniverse 2 now. But today, in 2020, when I look back at all my favorite LineWriter tracks, this is the one I get the most out of. The LineWriter track I enjoy watching the most. I've never seen a track marry quirk and scenery this well before. I've never seen quirk mechanics used so effectively for narrative and world-building purposes before. I've never got such a sense of structure and scale from a LineWriter video before. I've never seen a LineWriter video with lore this insightful and clever and meta. The camera work is so good. The ending is so good. The music sync visuals are so good. The narrative is so good, and it works so well. This track is so good that it dragged me out of my self-induced 2-year video essay purgatory to write my longest ever video essay, because I just really needed to get all the things I love about this track off my chest and out into the world. I certainly hope this isn't my last LineWriter video essay, but if there is one video essay I absolutely had to make, it's this one. So, if you like this video, if you got something out of it, that's great. But I don't feel like I'm making this video for an audience. I feel like I'm making it for myself. I feel like I needed to make this video because I needed to exist, just so I can understand my relationship to this LineWriter track. That's how much Omniverse 2 has affected me. I don't even feel like I can start working on my next project until I've digested everything that Omniverse 2 has shown me to be true, has shown me to be possible. So that's why this video exists. Thanks for joining me. I hope you learned something. This has been Rabid Rambles about Omniverse 2 for 20 minutes. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. See ya. Hey, thanks for watching the first ever episode of LineWriter In Depth. Check out Omniverse 2, Omniverse 2 Beta, and Omniverse 1 right here on the screen or via the links in the description. Also check out our other video essays on LineWriter, and if you want to support us, click on the link in the description to buy us a coffee. Which LineWriter track would you like us to examine in depth next? Tell us in the comments below.